Hi, everyone. I'm a little nervous. I haven't done this in a while. So my name's Joe Umberger. I'm a drug addict and an alcoholic. My dad was in the military. I'll try to give you the cliff notes here. My dad was in the military. He was kind of a rough guy, kind of brutal, strict, mean as a snake. So we moved, and so I was born in Cheyenne, Wyoming. Then we moved to Amarillo, Texas when I was about 2 or 3 years old. I remember never feeling like I fit in my skin, if that makes any sense. Like, I felt like other people didn't understand how I felt. Never mind that I never explained how I felt. I just didn't feel like I fit, and that kind of goes all the way back as far as I can remember. And so we moved from there when I was about 12. We moved to Waco, Texas after my dad retired from the Air Force. And Waco, Texas is like the scene of the crime for me. That's where I think I had my first drink when I was about 9 years old. But then when we moved to Waco, I discovered pot. I was about 12. I didn't know the language then, but I basically decided I'm going to do this no matter what. Like, this changes how I feel, and I like how it makes me feel, and that was my beginning down the rabbit hole. I was a pack-a-day smoker for over 40 years, that kind of stuff. Like, I don't want to say that marijuana was a gateway for me. I think cigarettes were probably a gateway because that's where I learned the skill of being dishonest and hiding and subterfuge and all that. So, and sneaking and getting away with it. And it turns out I was really good at getting away with things. So by the time I was about 13, I was selling pot, and a lot of it. I always thought it was funny that all my friends would come by my house on Friday afternoon and stay for 5 minutes and leave saying, "Thanks a lot, Joe," and my parents never figured that out. But I always had plenty of weed and a pocket full of cash. And we were pretty poor. Like, my dad was a sergeant in the Air Force, so we were pretty poor, and there were 6 kids. And out of 6 kids, 100% all of us are addicts and alcoholics. And so I was in good company, or got it honest, however you want to say it. Anyway, so I just wanted to get high. And so it started this thing of trying to live a double life. Of trying to, because I was raised in the church. My dad was a Christian. We went to church every Sunday, with or without an ass whooping. We went to church. Pardon me, I'm kind of foul-mouthed. But so my dad's thing was, you went to church if you lived in his house. Anyway, so by the time I'm 14, I'm out there. I'm taking everything I can get my hands on. I'm doing LSD. I'm taking pills. I'm like, whatever. I was willing to. Looking back on it, it was pretty reckless. But I thought I was fearless, you know, and the truth is I was miserable and terrified. And so by the time I was about 14, I got my hands on methamphetamine for the first time. I did my first injection of methamphetamine at 14, and that was it. Like, these are my people. Like, the most intensely pleasurable feeling I could imagine. And I spent 20 more years trying to have that experience again and never did. But I tried. It wasn't for lack of trying. So, in and out of school, in and out of trouble, but I always sold drugs, so I always had money, and I always got away with it. Like, I started reading, like, maybe when I was about 12 or 13, that was my solace, that was my escape, was I read books. I read. And even through my addiction, throughout the whole thing, I read a lot. And so I thought I was smart. I thought that's what that meant. I read books, I understand all these big words, so I'm smart. And I got away with it, and I kept getting away with it. Got my high school girlfriend pregnant, dropped out before my senior year, and down the rabbit hole I went. Because now I'm out from under my dad's roof, I can do whatever, right? And so I started really moving weight. And of course that marriage blew up. We were divorced. I got married when I was 18. We were divorced before I was 20. So being a smart alcoholic, I got a job in a bar. It's a good idea. And so I'm working as a bartender and selling dope out the back door, and never got caught. So again, I guess that made me feel like I was smart and bulletproof. I never really got caught until I got caught. But that went on for a couple years, and then I met a girl I couldn't live without. We got married. We had 2 sons. In all this time, my using was would get out of control, and then I would reel it in. It would get out of control, and then I would reel it in. I tried to keep a job, and I tried to pay the bills, but man, I just needed to get high. I never meant to deprive my children of anything or be unfaithful to my wife, but I just needed to get high. I just needed to get high. That was the thing. By the time I was about 25, 26, I think, 1985, we got divorced, and my dad died. And my divorce was final, and my dad died in the same week. And I went off the deep end. For the first time, I pulled out all the stops. It was running up and down the road with millions of dollars in cash and pounds of meth, and didn't get caught. And so, again, I thought I was pretty smart. Anyway, then I got caught. I got caught with a very little bit, but during this time, I was always a wheeler dealer. Buy it cheap, sell it, that sort of thing, right? And I had a friend who was a lawyer who helped me get a federal firearms license. So I'm dealing guns, and I'm dealing meth, and they frown on that. And so anyway, I got caught one night. I had about 2 grams of meth in my pocket, and I had a gun, and I got arrested. And he got me out of jail, and I went right back to it. I didn't even pause. Went right back to it. I need money to pay this lawyer, right? Man, I paid a lot of money to lawyers. But they had me, and they sent me to the penitentiary. I had a really good lawyer, so I wasn't there very long. I was there about 5 months, I think. But during all this time, I have to say that I was able to kind of sort of control it, because like I had rules. Like if you don't sleep this night, you sleep the next night. You always eat at least once a day. Always drink plenty of fluids, all that kind of stuff. And my thing was dope and money. And it was, I don't know, it was equally about both. But I was used to having a lot of cash. And then when I got out of the penitentiary, of course, when I went to penitentiary, everything just disappeared. Like all my stuff was gone, right? I had some cars and a gun collection, that kind of stuff, but when I got out, I had no control. I went off the deep end. I found myself staying awake for 4 or 5 days at a time, not showering, not eating. I got really sick. Like, I got out in August. About February of that next year, I fetched up on my mom's front porch one Sunday morning, and I've been out ripping and running. I was all strung out, bristling with weapons, on parole, felony, carrying 2 guns. It's your mom, right? So you can always go hide out there and eat and sleep until you get your whatever back, and then go out and do it again. And I showed up on her front porch, and I put my key in the door, it wouldn't work. Wouldn't open the door. I'm like, and I could, she was a Christian. She was up, it was Sunday morning, she was up getting ready for church. And I could see her, she had that kind of cloudy glass in her front door, and I could see her in the kitchen moving around, coffee, washing dishes or whatever. And I'm banging on the door. And she finally puts down what she's doing, and she comes over and opens the front door, and I went to barge in. She put her foot in front of the door. And she said, "Hold on a minute. I don't like you anymore. You scare me. And I don't want you to come here anymore until you're ready to get help with your drug problem." And I'm like, Mom. So I sat down, and she told me, "Get off her porch. Get off my porch." And she locked the door. And she saved my life. Right then, that changed it right there. That's when I went, this can't go on. This has to stop. So I'm either going to put a gun in my mouth, or I don't know, this has got to stop. And so like that next week, Wednesday or Thursday, I called her and said, "I don't know what to do. What does that mean? Get help. What does it mean?" Because I didn't, and so she made some phone calls. She gave me a number to call. I went to Austin, Texas. Saturday, March the 3rd of 1989, I went to Austin, Texas to go to rehab, and I haven't had a drink or a shot of dope since. So that's pretty good. And so the first couple of years of being sober is peeling the onion, right? And it was a lot. I grew up in a really violent culture. I had real anger issues. I had a lot of trauma. There was a lot to unpack. So I spent probably the first 3 or 4 years I was sober doing step work. I went to a meeting every day. My sponsor said, look, there's nothing in this world more important than you having your butt in a chair in an AA meeting every day, no matter what. I don't want to hear it. Go to a meeting, right? And I would call him and he'd say, you been to a meeting today? Nope, click. He would hang up on me. I'm like, right? It's me. But I labored under the delusion that was important somehow. So I went to meetings every day. And on the weekends, because what I found out then was that I don't know anybody. And I don't know how to be a civilized human being. I don't know how to be nice. I don't know how to take a shower and brush my teeth every day. Eat 3 times, all that basic stuff that you think you learn as a kid, and I guess I did. Just kind of, that kind of a drug-fueled life just makes, it unstructures everything. It just broke everything down to, I don't know, I didn't need to be rehabilitated, I needed to be habilitated. And one of the things you do in the 12-step meeting is they tell you, you don't get to keep this unless you give it away. Like, you're not going to stay sober unless you help the next guy stay sober. That's the deal. Each one teach one. And so my sponsor pushed me to do service work. I got on a service committee when I was about 9 months sober, and all this time I'm going over him. He had this garage where he worked on, greasy old garage where he worked on cars, and I spent, I don't know how many hours sitting in that garage on that couch talking through my stuff with him. And this man saved my life so many times. His name was Timothy Tate. He sponsored me for about 20 years, and he always knew what to say, and he always knew what not to say, and he always reminded me not to feel sorry for myself, to get off my butt and go help someone else. No matter how much pain you think you're in, if you go help someone else, your pain gets smaller. Pain shared is pain lessened. A lot of work, meetings every day, sponsoring people, carrying meetings into treatment centers, into jails, detox. Now there's a thing for you. Go Sunday morning at 7 o'clock and tell your story to a group of people in a detox center who are still shaking and sweating. It's a good reminder. That's not like me, that is me. And so I did that. When I was about 2 years sober, my brother Steve, who I stayed with while I was going to, because I got to Austin, I stayed with him for about 3 weeks and slept on his couch. And he's the one that got me into rehab. He got me sober, basically, right? And took me to meetings every day and fed me and bought me cigarettes and gave me clothes. And he died of an overdose when I was 2 years sober. And I thought, this doesn't work. I went to my sponsor and I went, this doesn't work. This is all BS. It doesn't work. What's the difference between people who stay sober and people who don't stay sober? And he handed me a big book like he always did. Oh my God. Look at page 58. On page 58 it says, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed this path. And if you want to read that paragraph, they read it at the start of every AA meeting everywhere in the world. And by the way, that book is in 43 languages. So AA has saved millions of lives. I remember when I first went to a meeting, listening to these people and going, there's a book about it? Right? A book that's been around for 70 years? Like, I was astonished that there were other people like me. And the truth is, I'm not really different at all. I have that same problem. I'm a garden variety drunk with a garden variety story. I like to think it's dramatic, but that's not true. I have what the book calls the magic magnifying mind of an alcoholic. So, and it is, believe me. So anyway, he died of an overdose. Really shook me. And the book says that when we're in trouble, I can't quote it exactly, but when we're in trouble, pour ourselves more into helping others. And so I did that. And about a year later, my brother Tom died of cancer. And I'm like, okay, keep going. But the people in AA, they came and knocked on my door and said, you were at the meeting last night. Where were you? Like, you know, they became a family, more than a family, because there were so many of them, really big family. But that's what they do. They save your life every day. AA didn't save my life, it saves my life, is what I found out. And so they loaned, because I lived in Austin, he was in the hospital in Dallas. I don't know if y'all know Texas, but that's a 5-hour drive. My little old junk car wouldn't make that drive, so they loaned me their car. They buy me gas, you know what I mean? Like, they took care of me. And I felt so grateful to those people. Still in touch with some of them. But so in the meantime, I'm trying to repair my relationships and spend time with my children. I had to move out of Waco. There was just too much bad history there, so I'm living in Austin. I'm going back and forth to Waco, spend time with my kids. And so for the first time, when I'm 4 years sober, my boys are going to come spend Christmas with me. Saturday night, December 13th of 1993, I got a call that my oldest son was killed in a car wreck.
Oh my goodness.
And he was coming the next Saturday to spend Christmas with me, 2 weeks, and it was a big deal. It was a big deal. And it really knocked me on my butt. It really jerked the rug out from under my feet. And again, I'm like, this doesn't work. Look at all I'm doing, and you know, all I've tried to do to be helpful. And I'd started a company and blah blah blah, making good money, and it all just kind of went dark. And I sat in the dark with a gun in my hand and listened to the same Sue songs for about 3 months. And people came and knocked on the door, and I ignored it. And finally, one of my friends said, we're not leaving until you open the door. And so they dragged me to a meeting, and the next weekend, I went to see my sponsor, because I wasn't calling him. He was trying to call me, because, you know, it was before cell phones. It was like 93. And I went to see him, and we sat down in his garage, greasy old garage, smoking cigarettes. And he said, what? Like, just say it, right? Because just say it. So I told him, I've done all this, I got sober, I'm trying to build my relationship with my family, I'm trying to be of service, I'm trying to live in God's will. Why is this happening to me? And he said, it didn't happen to you. And so at 4 years sober, almost 5 years sober, I learned what humility is really about. I think that's when I started to really understand that no matter what's going on with you, there's somebody that's in way more pain than you, and your job, your responsibility, your duty as a human, as a decent person, is to try to find a way to help that person. Somebody will help you. Don't worry about you. Go help someone else. And so, yeah, so I didn't give up. I decided that none of this meant anything. Like, I don't care about the company, I don't care about the tools and the vehicles, have it. And I went and got a job in a treatment center because I wanted to help people. And yeah. So I got my first job in a drug and alcohol rehab in August of '94, excuse me. Turns out I was pretty good at like sitting down and listening to people, and you wouldn't know it by hanging around me because I talk a lot, but I'm also a fairly good listener, and so I learned how to listen, and I learned how to ask questions, and I learned that nothing you say is going to get them sober and nothing you say is going to get them drunk. Just listen and try to do that one thing that they need you to do right now so they feel okay, just for a minute. And that plants a seed, and that's a powerful thing. And most of them are going to die. I learned that too. I've watched, I don't know how many kids die of overdoses, especially in the last few years. So I worked in treatment. I went back to school, got a counseling licensure in the state of Texas, worked as a counselor for about 6 or 7 years. I don't know if I ever helped anybody or if I was even any good at it, but I learned a lot about myself. I took anger management classes, and I took ethics classes, and I took classes, lots of classes. I got a folder at home still that's like all these certifications that I got. Adolescent neurochemistry and all that, most of it. But I retained a fair amount of it. But I got really, here's the thing, if you're a helper and you find yourself sitting behind your desk going, just go drink. You're going to die anyway, go drink. You need to go sell shoes, right? That's what my sponsor said, go sell shoes, like literally. So I quit after about 7 years of being a counselor. I let my licensure lapse. I went to work doing retail management. Did that for a few years, and it just, I made a lot more money because as a counselor, if you don't know, you don't make money. Like, that's not how that works. Like, you make enough to keep the lights on and food in the fridge, and that's it. Like, you drive a junker car, and it's, it has to be about helping and not about helping yourself and not making money, which I didn't. But then I got this job in retail and making all this bonus money, and it felt pretty good, but it just kind of, there was that hollow spot. It's like, I'm not helping. This is not helping. This is, I don't know. I think I was fairly good at it, and I made really good bonus money, but I didn't care about it. I didn't care about it. I didn't care about corporate. I don't care about all that, counting money and, keeping a ledger and doing inventory and all. It just didn't mean anything to me. So I wandered back to a treatment center after a few years, but on the operations side. And so I got into managing sober houses. I think that was the first job I got, managing a sober house. And then from there, it was running a drug testing program, which is where I met this magical woman right here, who's my higher power, Amy. And I'll tell y'all that through all this, I don't identify as a Christian. And mainly that's because I don't identify with a lot of the unethical behavior I've seen out of people who call themselves Christians. My dad was the very first one, and maybe that's something I'll overcome at some point, but I'm not really trying very hard. But I do have a relationship with God, and I pray on my knees, and I pray because that is an expression of humility. Get on your knees, be teachable. Anyway, so drug treatment centers, and then I got promoted and ended up running this company that had like 15 sober houses and a drug treatment program and 10 sober coaches and a drug testing lab and all that, blah, blah, blah. Then I moved from there to another company and like that. And then this girl, 19-year-old, this beautiful kid, she was a trained and not a stripper, like a dancer. Like she was a classically trained dancer from Woodland Park in Dallas, really wealthy, affluent neighborhood in Dallas. Her house manager called me and said, something wrong with Melissa. Her door's locked. She won't answer. I'm like, okay, we'll kick the door. We're like, I can't get it open. So I went over there and she was dead. 20 maybe, 19 or 20. Melissa Mowry was her name. Died of an opiate overdose. And we administered Narcan, but I'm just like, I can't do this. I don't want to do this anymore. Like, that was maybe the 9th or 10th overdose that I had to attend that year, and I just went, I'm not going to do that anymore. I just don't, I know I'm being a coward, but like, let somebody else take over, like I'm out. And so I decided to, kind of under duress, move to Nashville. And we just talked about it in therapy, so I can say that. We have a marriage counselor. God bless her. Anyway, yeah, it's a comedy. But she says we're a perfect couple, so I don't. Maybe she's not very good or something, or maybe I don't know. Amy comes from this amazing family, and she's a magical person, and I don't deserve her, and I know that, but I act like I do because I'm a good actor. So anyway, I moved here. The week I moved here, Amy's condo burned. Like, thanks, okay, got it. Get on your knees, right? You're not in charge of anything. The outcome's not up to you. That's the most important thing I've learned. Do your part, move your feet. You're not in control of the outcome. That's God's job. Do your part, let God do the rest, right? It's do this, God got that, other humans have this, whatever. You're not in charge of cleaning up the mess. Do your part. So I moved here, and Amy's mom introduced me to Steve Norris, and I like to think he has really good judgment, but he hired me anyway, and he hired me as a case manager because they have this program. It's elevator speech is it's a long-term, faith-based, residential vocational training program. So what we do is we take inner-city kids, at-risk, inner-city, underserved, well, it's mostly black kids, and they're mostly gang members. They're fun. You haven't lived until you get in a room with 20 5-deuce Crips from JCUC over there on the JC Napier project and make them play Duck, Duck, Goose. So that kind of power has its benefits. But here's the thing. And so I started there as a case manager because they had nobody who had any experience with case management. Nobody had any experience with addiction and what that looks like. And so within a month of me being there, we cleaned that place out. I'm like, this kid's using. Like, look at, you see him sitting there with his eye, like, he's not tired. He's high on opiates, like drug testing. So and then I've had to fight them tooth and nail, haven't I? Yeah, I've had to fight them tooth and nail because they want to trust their instincts. And if you don't understand addiction, your instincts are wrong. Sorry. I don't know what to tell you. You don't know what you're talking about. Like, and Steve has been this amazing, I don't know if y'all know Steve, but he's the most steadfastly humble man I've ever met in my life. He works 60 hours a week and doesn't take a salary. I mean, he's a way better person than me because I at least need a paycheck. But so we take these kids. I spend a lot of time developing relationships with the criminal justice system in Davidson County. And I had some experience with that in Texas, but a lot of time in the courts, a lot of time developing relationships with like the federal pretrial services and federal justices, public defenders, probation. That's a whole lot of what I do is like, when we get these kids in here, I'm like, you send them to us, now leave them alone. Let us do this thing we do with them. And we get them in there, first of all, they have to go through like a week of boot camp. The on-ramp is called Mental Toughness Week. We do it in a gym over in West Nashville. And the way that works is we find their physical limit and we push them past it to see how they're going to act. We'll start Monday morning. We do it for a week. So Monday through Thursday of that week, we start at 8 o'clock in the morning and we do physical fitness stuff. And we literally work them till they drop. And then we tell them to get up and we work them some more. And we'll start with 35 or 40 guys on Monday morning, and Friday morning we'll accept 15 guys. And I always tell them, like, I have enough relationships with all the bailiffs and the court officers that I can go in there and find the bailiff and go, hey, I'm here to talk to this kid. This is his attorney. Can you put him in an interview room for me? And I'll go in there and kind of read him the riot act and try to feel him out a little bit. So the court will order them to us. Like, it's a condition of your bond if you're out on bond, or it's a condition of your probation if you do a plea deal, that you have to come complete 413 strong. So, and I ask them, like, which 15 do you think we're going to take? Like, the kid that does the minimum, the kid in the middle, doesn't have a chance. The guy in the back, we're going to send him home Tuesday. Like, you're not going to make it, dude. We welcome you to come back next time, but when you're serious. So we do physical fitness stuff in the morning, like a lot of running and sprints, you know, like anybody familiar with F3? We do F3 style workouts with them, like a CrossFit workout in the morning. Then in the afternoon, we do team building exercises to see, can they operate in a community? Can they work together towards a common goal? Are they teachable? Do they have the neuroplasticity to shift gears from running around with a gun in their pants and a pocket full of pills and a pocket full of cash to show up at class at 8 o'clock, don't be late. If you're late, you have to run a mile, right? We do what's called late fees. So we do that Monday through Thursday, and Saturday morning or Friday morning we also give them a poem to memorize on Monday morning, a poem called See It Through. So Friday morning they come in, they have to recite the poem. If you can't recite the poem, come back next time, right? Because when I meet them at the court, I'll give their lawyer, I'll text their lawyer the poem and say, give this to him, he needs to know it. If you don't know the poem, you don't get accepted. So they have to come in Friday morning, recite the poem, and then if they recite the poem, then we pull them in, and the whole staff sits around a table, and we ask them some pretty tough questions. So based on the strength of their performance during the week, attitude and effort is all that counts. Did they recite the poem? And the answer to those questions, we make our choices. It's a grueling day. But by about lunch, we've made our choices. God help us, literally, because, you know, the guy you think's going to do great falls out the first week, and the kid you're like, I don't know about this kid, but we're going to give him a shot, becomes a rock star. It's, you know, it reminds you over and over again that you can't see inside of someone's heart. Only God can do that. So, anyway, I can stop there, and we can do a Q&A, like, if that's cool.
Talk a little bit about the 12-step process and sort of the magic of the fourth step.
The magic of the fourth step. What do you think, Amy? Yeah. So here's how that works, and I blame my sponsor. God bless him. He died in like 2008, but I can still hear his voice. I have a picture of him in our back bedroom, but I can still hear his voice. Whenever I have a question, what would Tim say? And I can hear his voice. Work the steps or die. Really. And like the first club that I went to, that was some creative, crafty guy wood burned that into a plaque and hung it on the wall. Work the steps or die. But it's true. And it's true, and there's more than one kind of death. Because it says in the big book that the insanity reacher, we become resentful, like resentment is the number one offender. We become resentful, and we have a drink, and for us to drink is to die. And I'm like, hold on a minute. So you're telling me I've been sober 9 months or a year and a half or whatever it was, that I'm going to take one sip of beer and I'm going to fall over dead? And he's like, no, you're going to take one sip of beer and you're going to sever your connection with God, and then you're dead. You may as well be, because you're no use to anyone, right? And so the theory behind the whole thing, or the practice there is, if you're not helping someone, what do you, like, go drink, right? And I remember having kids in the sober house go, well, I'm not cleaning up after another man. He's a grown man. His mom doesn't work here. I'm not washing his dishes or whatever. And I called my sponsor about that, of course. I called him about everything. And he said, how much time have other people spent cleaning up after you? Financially, spiritually, increase the list ad infinitum. Like, everybody around me had to clean up after me, because all I did was lay waste. Like I was a bull in a china shop, like the big book says. Anyway, so the way the steps work is, I don't know if y'all are familiar. Like, the first step is we admit we're powerless. Our life is unmanageable. And every step starts with we, not I, we. We admitted we're powerless. Well, if you can't admit you're powerless, and you're going to continue to try to exert power over this thing that's more powerful than you, so good luck. And you see people come into the 12-step program and they wander off to one of 5 things. They wander off to a relationship, to the gym, to their job, to school, or to church. Right? Because, and God bless you, and it says in the big book, if you're part of a spiritual or a religious body, we encourage you to continue to enlarge your spiritual life. Perfect and enlarge your spiritual life. Those verbatim. If you fail to do that, then eventually you're going to drink again. So if you're not a part of a religious body, it's not required, but it's recommended that you get a set of spiritual practices and that you practice them consistently. Prayer and meditation, which is part of the steps. And the way I learned it is, prayer is asking God questions, and meditation is listening for the answer. And what my sponsor told me is, if you can shut up and sit down and be still for long enough, God will speak to you. You're not going to hear God's voice. If you do, go see a doctor, right? But God will speak to you, and He'll speak to you through other people and through the experiences that you have. But if you pray and ask God to guide your thinking and your actions, and you humbly and sincerely mean that, then you'll get guidance, because you'll know when you're not doing the right thing. See, because I didn't have that. My moral compass was broken. And so the way I got my moral, I didn't reset it. The world reset it for me. This experience and these actions reset my moral compass to where I actually care if I harm people, which was weird for me at first. I care if I'm selfish towards people. I care if I'm dishonest. Didn't care about that at all. It was, what do you got to say to get what you want? I was real good at that. I'm not even good at it anymore. I can't, you know what I mean? I'm not even good at deciding what I want, let alone talking people into giving it to me anymore. So, and that's a real change for me. That's growth. So you admit that you're powerless over alcohol, and then you admit that a power greater than you can restore you to sanity. And I'm like, restore? But I was insane in our definition in the 12 steps. And there's a lot of stuff in our language, in our culture now that came from the 12-step programs, and this is one of them. It actually comes from Albert Einstein. Insanity is repeating the same action and expecting a different result. Albert Einstein said that. I think he was pretty cool. He's one of my favorite people. I used to have a book of his quotes, and they were hilarious and all true. But anyway, so the third step says, made a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understood Him. So it doesn't mean Jesus or Allah or Buddha or Sri Krishna, because it needs to be open to everyone. It doesn't matter what your religion or spiritual belief, or even if you don't have any, we can save your life. We have something that will help you, right? And so that's critical. And in Bill's story in the Big Book, it talks about, because he struggled with it, because he went to World War I, and he was like, all the corruption and the burnings and chicanery, he calls it, the horrors he saw in World War I. How do I get to believe in this all-knowing, benevolent power when I've seen the things I've seen? And his friend said, why not choose your own conception of God? And I know that's true because I've sat in a room with 100 people, all of whom were sober, who were admitted drug addicts and alcoholics, who hadn't had a drink that day, right, who said they believe in God, and no two of them would describe God to you the same way. So there's that. So once you turn your will and your life over to the care of God, the book says, make a searching and fearless moral inventory. And that's when most of us go, oh no. Because what that sounds like is tell the truth about all the horrible things you've done. But when you get to writing it down and you have to go, and then the fifth step, here's the kicker. The fifth step is admit it to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Right, so all the dirty stuff I did in motel rooms and all the times that I cheated people for money, and you know what I mean? Like, if you're a meth user, like, sleazy motel rooms and bags of dope are a thing, just saying, and other stuff. I'm not going to go into detail, but I did a lot of stuff I had a lot of shame around, and it's universal with alcoholics that they did a lot of stuff that they have a lot of shame around. And my sponsor said, what's that called? Like, give it a clinical name. And I'd give him a name, and he'd hand me a dictionary and say, look it up. You didn't invent this. It's not new. This has been around, right? Like, and it turns out that all the stuff that I was so ashamed of was pretty common stuff. Not even unusual, let alone unique. And so there's a huge relief there. And I remember that he gave me 10 days to do my 4-step. He gave me very clear instructions. Get on your knees and pray. Get a tablet. Read these 2 pages in the Big Book, and then write. Shut up and write. Don't think, write. Make a list of names of people you're angry at. Resentment, the number 1 offender. Make a list of names of people you're angry at. And then write why you're angry at them. And then write what it cost you, what you stood to lose, right? And then the 4th column you do with there's 3 columns, and you do the 4th column with your sponsor. In the 4th column, it looks like this: selfishness, fear, dishonesty, resentment. That's it. That's what's wrong with an alcoholic. They're selfish, fearful, dishonest, and resentful. And that keeps them drinking and poisoning themselves all day, every day until they die, literally, and kill the people around them. So there's that, yeah. So then once you work the 5th step, clean the mess up, right? 6 is we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. You're supposed to do this after you do your 5th step. Now, when I did my 5th step, I took 10 days to write it. I went to my sponsor's house at 2 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, and we were still sitting in that greasy garage when the sun came up Monday morning. But when I got in my car and drove away, I was a different person, and I've never gone back. Like, I never felt clean, right, and deserving of God's love before that day. And then that day I knew God loves me. And why? Because I'm lovable. And he gave me this daily affirmation. I'm a perfect and loving child of God. I'm entitled to peace and prosperity. And I said that to myself the minute I woke up, because your subconscious is wide open when you wake up. I put that on the mirror in my bathroom. I said it to myself every day for 30 days, changed my life. Daily affirmations work. So you go home after your fifth step, you get on your knees and pray, and then you sit quietly for an hour. Sounds easy, but it's not. If you're an alcoholic who just did a fifth step, there's a lot of stuff going through your head, and a lot of emotion, a lot of fear and crying and all that stuff. But I didn't experience that. For the first time in my life, I sat really still. Like perfectly, I felt perfectly still and wasn't disturbed by anything. Everything was, I remember him saying, you're thinking everything's going to be okay. It's already okay. You need to get there. Everything is already okay. Everything that's happening is in God's will. Right? Now try that when you're standing next to the grave of someone you don't think you can live without. Right? This is in God's will for you. Yeah, so that's a struggle. But life is a struggle, right? Oof, that sounded bad. The struggle is always, how is this in God's will for me? Why is this in God's will for me? And I don't really say why that much anymore, but the how is this in God's will for me is an important question. Anyway, so after you do 6, then you pray and ask Him to remove the defects of character. It's a dirty trick because I still have all of mine. They're not as bad as they were, I don't think. But you got to ask the people I hang around, they can tell you. And then you clean up the mess. And then you go help another alcoholic. And the 12th step is, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and practice these principles in all our affairs. And that last part is the kicker. My favorite step, though, is the 10th step. You're supposed to do this every night when you go to bed. I don't. I did for a long time. I kind of do it in an abbreviated fashion in my head, but I got pretty good after 20 years or so of going through that without having to use pencil and paper. But I know when I harmed someone, I know what I could have done better, I know what I needed to make right tomorrow. But the 10th step is continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. So what's the key word in that sentence? When. Not if, but when. When we were wrong, promptly admitted it. And that's the key to staying sober. Long-term sobriety is about gratitude and humility and admitting your wrongdoings. It's that simple and that complex.
And your experience has been that people who don't work the 4th step
die? Well, I'm sorry. It's literally a fact. If you don't work those steps, if you can go in there and stay sober and not work the steps, then you're not really an alcoholic, and that's okay. Congratulations. I'm literally, sincerely happy for you if you're not an alcoholic, because then that means probably it didn't get as bad for you as it did for a lot of the people I've seen, or for me, for that matter. Like. I've seen people way worse than people who got sober because they spilled wine on their tennis whites, and that was unacceptable, you know. I sponsored a nuclear physicist drank himself to death. Smartest person I've ever met in my life. I sponsored a doctor. He was the chief of internal medicine at Parkland Hospital in Dallas, Texas. And him and his wife were drinking and taking pills and hit a kid on a bicycle in their car on the back roads out by Kerrville, Texas. And he came to our treatment center. When he graduated, he asked me to sponsor him. And I'm like, but I sponsored him. Drank himself to death. Literally drank himself to death because he couldn't do it. He couldn't do it. He could not admit his wrongdoings. He could not fearlessly look at his past and admit the truth about himself to himself. So I've seen a rocket scientist, a doctor, and a nuclear physicist drink themselves to death. I've seen somebody who has an 8th grade education stay sober and help hundreds of people. So you tell me, you know, you aligned with God, anything is possible. You against God, sorry, bud.
Questions for Joe?
That bad, huh?
Yeah, this may be too broad, so just, you mentioned your sponsor, and you knew the questions to ask.
Yes.
It was not asked. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
That he knew what question to ask? I think...
It's not to ask.
And what not? Yeah.
Well, he never asked me how I felt about it. Because he's the person that taught me that no one cares about your feelings but you. And when it comes to getting sober, I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, when you're a little kid, your mom, oh, honey, but when you're a grown man and you're responsible for your actions, then how you feel about it is beside the point. And that's what the 4th step is really about. I'm glad you asked that. The 4th step is get out of your feelings, get out of your head, and put the facts, the cold, hard facts on paper, and then go sleep, and then get up the next morning and look at them in black and white on a piece of paper, right? Oh, I felt this and blah, blah. No, I'm a liar, I'm a thief, I'm a cheat, I'm a sneak. You know, I'll steal your dope and help you look for it. Literally, I've done that, right? I'll steal your wallet, right? I'll put a gun in your face and take all your money because you owe me. Right? Is there any scenario where that's true? I did that a few times where I was just like, sorry, bud, you're going to pay me. Like, over money? You're going to take someone's life or threaten their life over money? But I did that. I was not a nice guy, and I operated in a really violent culture where you don't allow people to take things from you, and you don't allow people not to pay you. You let one person not pay you, and you got a big problem. Then everybody decides they don't have to pay you.
What questions did he ask you?
Are you feeling sorry for yourself? Are you wrong? You know, what do you get? Do you want to be right or do you want to be free? That was his favorite question, by the way. You know, like he would tell me to do an amends, because I remember the amends. The 9th step is, 8th step is made a list of all people we harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. It doesn't mean you'll ever even see them again, but if you do, you have to make amends. And so I get to the 9th step, and I've got my amends list, which comes from your 5th step, tells you everyone you've harmed. Because you were feeling sore about it, ends up you harmed them. That's how that kind of shakes out. But then I sat down with him, I'm ready to make my first amends. He said, just rip the Band-Aid off, pick the worst one first, right? So the worst one was to my ex-mother-in-law. I'm not going to go into the details, but I owed her a huge amends. And I said, okay, so let me get this straight. And he said, before you make an amends, you come over here, we sit down, we're going to talk through it. And he planned that once I made a few and I got what it was really about, because I'm a little slow on the uptake, once I got what it was about, then he was going to let me, you know, just call him and go, hey, I'm going to go make this amends tomorrow. Okay, call me when you're done. And there are some ingredients to amends, and explaining how you feel isn't one of those ingredients, right? Nobody wants to hear why you did what you did. So I said, let me get this straight. So I sit down with her. I ask her for some time. I sit down with, and she's going to be leery, by the way, because I've been a real harmful person to her in the past. So I sit down with her, and I apologize, and he's like, whoa, I'm going to stop you right there. Don't you dare apologize. This woman's been listening to you apologize for 15 years. She doesn't want to hear you apologize because your apologies don't mean anything anymore. She wants to hear you say, I was wrong. Here's exactly how I was wrong. And this is my commitment not to ever repeat that behavior. How do I make this right? Those are the ingredients of a real amends. You don't explain yourself when you're apologizing. You say, I was wrong. I was wrong. This is how I was wrong. I lied to you, I cheated you, I stole from you, I was deceitful, whatever. I took some, because you know, you find out as an alcoholic when you get sober that you take things more valuable than money from people. You know what I mean? And that's a bad feeling, but making that right is the only way you can hold your head up, right? And if you can't hold your head up, you're going to get thirsty. It's just the way that works. So does that answer the question? So yeah, never explain why you did something. Just admit that you were wrong. That's what people want to hear. They want to hear that, and they want to see you be a different person. Because amends. Of course, my sponsor had a dictionary that was published in 1939. That's the year the Big Book was published. And when I first got sober, because I'm always reading all these technical manuals and science books, archaeology, and he said, put all that stuff away. You're not allowed to read anything but this book and this book. Big Book Dictionary. If it has more than 3 letters, look it up. I'm like, well, he's like, you're a pseudo-intellectual. I'm like, okay, pseudo. And then I looked up pseudo when I got home, and it means fake. Right?
Do we have time for one more question? Anybody? Thank you.
Thank you for having me. And this guy met with me every Sunday for a long time and got me through a real tough period. I just want to say thank you.
It's my pleasure, man. Thank you.